All right, guys, today we're going to uncover some whiskey myths. Yeah. So these are some things that people have asked me in the past. Being the whiskey guy, right? Everybody's like, does this need to be this or this need to be this? Check it out. All right, thanks for coming back. So basically, what I'm trying to say with this whole thing is there's a bunch of, I've been told in the past, like one of the big ones is bourbon can only be made in Kentucky, right? Let's get that one out of the way. That is a very common myth. That is a very common understanding that it's only made in Kentucky. And some people say in Bourbon County, Kentucky. Well, that is not true. It's just not true. Legal definition says anywhere in the United States, including Hawaii and Alaska. Yes. I don't know about Guam. I don't know about the territories and stuff like that. Now, Kentucky is, I wouldn't say the birthplace, but is probably the starting point of bourbon, right? So I get why people would say that, but it's just a myth. There's great bourbons all over the place. Texas, California, Illinois, Idaho, probably, whatever. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that's just a myth. Don't do a little more research into it and you'll understand that. And another one that has to do with bourbon as well is that Jack Daniel's isn't bourbon. I know this one's going to hurt some people. Now, Jack Daniel's is Tennessee whiskey, right? They call it Tennessee whiskey, right? The reasoning is they charcoal mellow it. That delineation, that Lincoln County process that they do, does not make the bourbon different because you cannot add or subtract anything from it with chemicals. Now, putting it through charcoal filtering would be the same thing as chill filtering, if you were gonna, say that. So, Jack Daniel's is bourbon. They just don't call it bourbon because they want to be considered Tennessee whiskey because of the charcoal mellowing that's done with it. I know that's some fighting words for some people. They believe that Jack Daniel's and some of the other ones that use that process, that it's not bourbon, but it has a bourbon mash bill. Most of them 80% corn or more. So that one's on the fence. If you think it is, then great. If you don't, it's fine, whatever. One that I get asked a lot is older whiskey. Yes, I have notes. I'm sorry, I have to look at my notes. I'm getting old and I can't remember nothing. So older whiskey, speaking of getting old, older whiskey is better. Is always better. The older the whiskey, the better it's going to be. Well, I will tell you, yes and no, right? Yes and no. Older whiskey sometimes can be over oaked, overly tannic, can be overly harsh. Like, not that anybody's had it. Happy 23 or something like that, right? It's super oak present. It's super tannic. It's super, it's all over the place. Is it good? I'm not saying it's not good. I'm just saying that it's not better. I believe personally that the 15-year Pappy is much better than the 23. I've said that in the past and I'll say it again. Now with scotches, let's go to Scotch realm. Most scotches, unless they're blended or something like that, start out with an age statement of about 10 years, depending, right? Ardbeg has a 5-year, whatever, it's fine. The reason is they're not using new oak, so it can stay in that barrel longer and it won't get that over oaked influence, right? So you can have 20-year, 25-year-old scotches that are not over oaked. Now, are they better? No, that doesn't make them better. Age doesn't make anything better, besides maybe cheese. Wine, I guess, gets better with age. But whiskey in a barrel isn't going to be a 15-year whiskey and an 18-year whiskey. Yes, it could be, but defining better is another thing we have to talk about. What makes it better? More oak influence, less harsh on the palate? Then if that's the case, yes. Or is it just time? You just want that age statement, right? Because I guarantee you, if you got a 15-year whiskey and pulled it at 14 years, it's going to taste very similar. Just saying. Or if you pulled it at 16 years, it's going to taste very similar, especially in that climate. Now in Texas or something like that, we're having a slow water reduce and stuff like that to make sure that we don't over extract oak and stuff like that here in America. So the older the whiskey doesn't always make it better. Just understand that. All right, moving on. Someone asked me this one time, and I didn't know how to explain it, so I guess I'm going to explain it here. Single malt does not mean a single barrel. Does that make sense? Like, just because it's single malt, that doesn't mean it's one barrel of whiskey. It means it's malt from one distillery. Now, it can be any type of malt, and it could be multiple malt strains inside that. Like, let's say you were making a whiskey, right? A malt whiskey. You could make it with 2-row malt, 6-row malt, caramel malt, and a Pilsner malt. You could use all of those malts. It's still considered a single malt, right? Because single delineates the place of distillation, right? Okay, just understand that. Doesn't mean single barrel. Malted barley, obviously. Okay, moving on to the next one. This one, I'm on the fence with, somewhat. We have talked about this in the past a couple of times, and its neck pour is bad. Where do we go from here? Okay, neck pour isn't bad. Neck pour means that it's the first pour out of the bottle. So there's not much airspace in the actual whiskey bottle because they fill them up pretty full. So it's that first little bit. It's the introduction to the whiskey, if you will. Even opening it one time ingests air and oxidation into the whiskey. So you try that whiskey the next day, it could taste, minusculely different, right? It could. So that's what people are saying by neck pour. I like to open bottles and try them and all the things, right? And that first drink that I get out of them is really good on most of them, right? So the neck pour isn't bad. It's just, it is a thing. And putting oxidation into the bottle, having it open up a little bit and sitting with it and all those things, and letting your whiskey air out, don't just drink it right away, right out of the bottle. Let it sit on the counter for 5 minutes, 10 minutes sometimes. So just understanding that neck pour isn't always bad. Okay, here's another one that, whatever. Rule number 1 in whiskey is the best whiskey is the whiskey you like to drink the way you like to drink it, right? And that is rule number 1. Whatever whiskey you want to drink, I don't care. As long as you're drinking with friends and as long as you're not overdoing it. Amen? So, adding ice ruins the whiskey. That is incorrect. Now, what it does, it changes the whiskey. Absolutely. As soon as you add ice, especially if you're adding like Sonic ice or something like that, it is going to dilute it like that. Because the whiskey has high ethanol content, and therefore it's going to absorb into those water molecules and it's going to water the whiskey down. Therefore, changing the flavor. That doesn't make it bad. It's changing the flavor. Sometimes it brings out more of the oak presence. Sometimes it subdues the whole thing and you can't taste anything but alcohol. So it just depends. I like, when I drink whiskey on the rocks, I get a big ice ball, the big round or square ice ball. I like the round ones. It doesn't matter. And I will put that in there, pour my whiskey on top of it, let it sit for a minute, and then go and have a sip. For one, whiskey can be warm, like temperature-wise, right? When it's hot during the summer, guess what? The last thing I want to be doing is having a neat pour of whiskey, right? I want to have it on ice or in a cocktail or something like that. So putting ice in it doesn't make the whiskey bad, just to let you know. Okay. Darker whiskey is always better. No, that is incorrect. Darker whiskey is not always better. Now, there is different caveats to that. Dark whiskey could mean that it's finished. I have a lot of sherried scotches that are super dark. It doesn't make them better. It just means they are changed from the original. But I also have Garrison Brothers, which is super dark. And the ones I have are finished there too. But their normal baseline whiskey is super dark. Balcones is super dark with their whiskeys. It's the oak influence. That's all it is. It has more oak influence and has colored the whiskey more. Because when you pour whiskey into a barrel, it is perfectly clear. Has no pigment at all. And then when you pull it out, depending upon the whiskey and depending upon the barrel, that's where the darkness comes from, the color comes from. So, darker whiskey does not mean that it's better. Here's one that gets me, which I understand. It's a stigma that is around Scotch, okay? That Scotch is always smoky. Scotch is smoky. No, it's not. There is a percentage of Scotch that is smoky, but the higher percentage of Scotches are unpeated. They are not smoky. They are not briny. They are beautiful, delicate, flowery malt whiskeys. Most of them malt whiskeys. So understanding that, the reason was back in the day, a long time ago, we're talking a long time ago, they used the peat to dry their barley out because they didn't have a bunch of wood and stuff like that. So, and they didn't have, boilers or steam jackets or convection ovens to put them in, right? So that peat imparted flavor into the malt, ergo making it smoky or briny or whatever. So when industrialization came and they had different ways of drying out their barley in, kiln rooms and stuff like that, they went that way. But a lot of those people, a lot of those distilleries held on to that old tradition. Even Balvenie, which is a unpeated whiskey brand, does a peated whiskey one time per year. It's called Peat Week. And they'll do a peated run of whiskey for that week, which is super cool, right? So not all Scotches are smoky. Just understand that. All right. Couple more, guys. So just hang on with me. Chill filtration ruins the whiskey. Okay. I have my opinions about this, but let's talk about chill filtration for a second. The reason you would chill filter something is because you want to make it quote unquote smoother. And you want to get some of the impurities out of the whiskey, right? Chill filtering also helps with cloudiness and stuff like that. Anyway, they chill it down to, I don't know the percentage or the degree that they chill it down to. And what happens is it particulates out some things and then they filter that part off, giving you a more, and a lot of the esters and congeners and stuff like that that are in the whiskey get left behind in the filtration of that. So a lot of Scotches are chill filtered, but also, and I don't know if you knew this, a lot, and I mean a lot of bourbons are chill filtered. Yeah, they are. One of the big ones is Wild Turkey. Wild Turkey is chill filtered. Now there is different, you can get a non-chill filtered Wild Turkey, but it's a, airport exclusive type thing. So chill filtration does not ruin the whiskey. It does change the whiskey. It does not ruin the whiskey either. It prevents cloudiness that impacts, but the impact on taste could be there. I mean, I would love to try to do, and I'm going to very soon, do a side-by-side of a chill filtered and a non-chill filtered of the same whiskey. You know what I mean? So that we could get that. All right. The last one for today we are going to do is corked bottles needs to stay on their side, like wine, right? That is incorrect. They do not. The alcohol content in a corked bottle will eat the cork. Now, if it's a synthetic cork, it is a little bit different, but they need to be upright so that no liquid is touching them, because if it will eat through that and you will have a leak. So what I tell people to do once every 6 months, once every year, you're going through your inventory of whiskey, right? turn them upside down. Just wet the cork. Wet the cork, leave it alone. If it's not already open, right? If it's open, wet the cork anyway. Pour you a drink and wet the cork, right? And open the bottles, right? Don't take them with you. But yeah, that's just some of the things that I was thinking about. And I thought, well, let's just do a video about it. Let's just talk about some of these things that people have asked me in my, when I do whiskey tastings and stuff like that. People always ask me very strange and unique questions. So I want to kind of get rid of some of those myths. So I hope you like this type of content. And if you do, please follow, like, subscribe, and everything I'm doing. And if you want, before the episode exclusive podcast just for you, think about heading over to Patreon, patreon.com/whiskey-shaman. And I appreciate you guys so much for hanging out with me. It's been a blast. Y'all be good. And until next time, keep your spirits up. Peace.